Hi, this is Meerovich-Pullin, and I would like to review another one of my games from the 2007 Illinois Open, which was possibly my strongest tournament ever. And the game I'm going to show you is my game against Ilan Meerovich, and his rating was 2066, and mine was 1895 at the time of this game. It's round 5. And Ilan Meerovich had actually beaten me fairly badly in a tournament before, where I had the white pieces and it was an accelerated dragon. And after he beat me, he got first place and I got second place in that event. And then, in another event, a couple weeks later, we didn't play each other, but we were the number 1 and number 2 seeds, and he won all of his games, and I drew one of mine, so I ended up number 2 to him again. And as I sat down, across from him, to play this game, he asked me if I was Meerovich-Pullin. So I don't know what that means if you don't remember somebody that you played twice in that month. But that's beside the point. Let's go over this game. So he was white, and it was a Queen's Gambit, and I played the Albin counter gambit, e5. I felt this was a good choice to surprise him, with him being the higher rated player, because the Albin counter gambit gives some very dynamic, messy positions. So d takes e5 and push to d4, knight f3, knight c6. This is the typical starting point of the Albin, in which white has several moves. He can play e4 or g3 or a3 or knight d2. He chose the most popular g3, and I play bishop to f5, which is a kind of offbeat variation. So this game, actually, I considered not publishing it at first because it's a very complicated and long game. It's 60 moves long, and there are numerous mistakes, and there's no way I could cover all of the possible variations in this game and keep it anywhere near 10 minutes for this clip. So I'm just going to show you the moves themselves with minimal commentary, and then at the end I can explain the final position. So he leaves theory by attacking me immediately. I had never seen this move before, but bishop to e6 seems logical. I'm attacking both his c and e pawns. And there's one move that guards both the pawns, which you know what it is. He played it queen to a4, and now g5, and he brings his knight back, and h6 to protect the g pawn. I'm still down the pawn, but I have some space to compensate me. Bishop to g2, queen to d7, queen to b5. I castle. Kind of a daring decision. His queen is in the neighborhood of my king, but I don't think he has any attack here, so I'm just castling into him, daring him to do something. And he plays his knight f to d2, unleashing the bishop. And if I play knight g-e7, the most natural move to prevent the double pawns, then he plays his knight to e4, and I'm in serious trouble. So the best move I could come up with was bishop h3, which allows him to double pawns, which he did. He captures, and I decide to trade queens. So now it's a very interesting position. My bishop on h3 has a great cramping effect on him, and he cannot easily develop his pieces. So I'm down one pawn here, but I'm happy with the result of my opening. He plays pawn to f4, and I play bishop to e7, threatening a pawn trade on f4, and then bishop h4 check. And he brings the knight out to stop that idea, and I push, and his knight has to go back to d2, and now I play d3. I play this move. I view it as a pawn sacrifice. I didn't think he would take this pawn. I thought he would maybe play knight to c3 here, but I was surprised when he did take it. Maybe he was assuming that I would play rook takes, and after king e2 I would need to retreat my rook, and then he could untangle his forces. But I'm taking advantage of the unique possibilities in this position, and maybe the extra 2 pawns he has here are not assets, they're obstacles. So I play bishop to c5, taking advantage of the diagonal that's opened up, and already the white rook on h1 is quite nervous because I'm threatening bishop to g2. And he plays king to e2, and I develop my knight to e7, and he attacks my bishop, and I counterattack his rook, and then I check him, and I to attack his rook again, gotta go to f1, and then I drop on d4. I want to control d4 because that's the pawn push he needs to free his position, which is really the central idea of the Albin counter gambit. So he develops a knight to the edge, which is, sort of a warning sign in chess when you need to develop your pieces this way. And I put my knight in the center, and he converges on d4, and then I push my pawn to renew the control of d4. So he admits his rook was better on the e-file, and then I start my attack on the flank by pushing the pawn. I want to open up kingside space to activate the only piece that isn't doing anything, my rook on h8. So he trades on d4, and I take with pawn, and he moves his king away, and then I play h4, and then he moves his knight, which sort of blocks his own bishop in, so he's not economically developing at all. So trades on g3, and I take with the knight, so I've won back one of my pawns. And he plays rook g1, and I play knight to e2, and then rook to h1. He's got a trade. Well, he doesn't have to. He can sacrifice an exchange. But in this position, he cannot stop my outside passed pawn without giving up a piece. So he plays knight to f1, and then he sacrifices a piece. So we play a few more moves. I have to go back to f5, and he checks, and then I defend from the side, and he plays b4. So right now I have a piece, he has some pawns, and his queenside pawns are beginning to become fluid. So I play bishop to f3, improving the position, and he plays a4. So he's really trying to press me on the queenside, but he's taking away his shelter for his king. And even though I have no pawns left and no queen, I am going to try to show that my rook, bishop, and knight can combine for a mating net on his king. That is my plan. And in this game he seemed rather unaware of my plan. Maybe he thought that I was trying to go after his kingside pawns or something. So I attack his rook, and he goes to c8, and I move my king over, and he goes his rook back to f8, which is a psychological advantage for me because we know that I have at least a draw in this position if he's willing to repeat moves with his rook. So I decide to take a chance. I go in for this check, and then I check on the 7th rank, and a check on c2, and now I gain the tempo by attacking the bishop, and then knight to d1, and then he takes for check, and my king goes to safety. And now he brings his rook underneath my pawn, and I play knight to c3 check, and he goes to c1, and I play rook to h2, attacking the bishop. And he goes to g5, and here in this position, I actually missed a forced mate in 3. So pause it and see if you can see it. I'm not going to show it to you, I'm just going to move on. So I check, which is not the best move, and then I check on d1, and now I have a little bit of a problem with my pawn on d4, so I decide to play a5 to see if he'll allow me to reinforce it with c5. Maybe if he plays rook takes, I can play pawn takes and use my passed pawn somehow. But no, he decided to take another pawn, and then I played c5, cementing my control over d4. So he plays f5 to control the squares with his bishop, defending diagonally, and I attack his bishop again for tempo, and he blocks, and I check him with the bishop, and he goes to b2, and then I pin him, and he goes to c1 to protect the bishop, and then I capture. And right now he checks me with the pawn on a6, and it looks like I can just take this, but that would be a fatal mistake, and I'll show you why later. So I tucked my king under to a7, and he has nothing here. He resigned. He doesn't even have a check on the 7th rank because I can play bishop takes rook. But let's look at this position, and let's see why white is lost. So let's say he captures here, and I take with pawn, and I'm threatening to checkmate on the back rank because I'm controlling all the squares around his king. And if he avoids the checkmate, then I can just check and queen my pawn on the last rank. So taking loses. If he plays some move like pawn push, then I check. And if he blocks this way, then after check, he will get mated, or if he runs the other way, he will still get mated. So there's really no way for him to, I mean, if he blocks the possible check, then this is just mate in 1. So there's no way for him to avoid checkmate in this position. What about if this check, then if I'd taken here, then after takes, this would have been a loss after rook check, and I lose the bishop. But I avoided this cheap trap. I just moved my king under the pawn and he resigned. So that was my very interesting game against Ilan Meerovich, and I hope you enjoyed watching.